Greetings and salutations. My name is Nick Hodge. I am an engineer on the Runthru software team, and I've been here for many, many years and have been part of Runthru Instruction and now Runthru Fusion, which we're going to be talking about today. So you might know Runthru for Runthru Instruction. Runthru Instruction is an application that allows you to take screenshots and add knowledge and intelligence to them, steps and procedures, and then publish those steps and procedures to a whole variety of different outputs. And we've had strong support for Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, and HTML for many years. If you haven't already seen in some of our seminars, we've recently added a video output, which is quite exciting to Runthru Instruction. Then we can produce pages in systems like SharePoint, Teams, Confluence, ServiceNow as part of a bigger knowledge management system. So it generates single files. What we have a challenge with, and what many people have a challenge with, is communicating complex systems, complex digital systems, in an online way to an audience. So one of those challenges that how we've solved that is by allowing us to combine individual files into help sites. What do I mean by this? Let me just minimize Runthru Instruction for a moment, and I'll just jump back to Runthru Fusion, and I'll click on the little help icon here in Runthru Fusion. And what we get is a web browser inbuilt into the application. This is our guide site, our support and guide site. It is live on the internet. You can actually look at it today. If I just pop over to a web browser, it's at support.runthru.com, and it is a help website. I can click on the information, the help for Runthru Instruction. If I want to get help on authoring, I can go to the authoring section. If I want to look on how to add frames, I click on add frames and an image frame, and there we go. So it allows me to this is a help site for Runthru Instruction, a search and navigation with breadcrumbs and those sorts of things. It is a website on the live web that we have live today. How do we build these things today? Traditionally, what you would do is you go to tools like Runthru Instruction or Word, you'd output HTML, you'd pour it into a content management system. You'd have to make sure you're using the right templates that give you all the right styling and branding. It gets very complex very quick, especially with lots and lots of content. So what we've done with Fusion is an application that allows us to fuse and bring all these different bits of content together and produce sites. So let's just jump in and have a look. What I'm going to do is start a new project. So this is Runthru Fusion, and I'm going to choose a source folder. So a source folder is just a place somewhere on disk. It could be, let me just go to the folder on my machine here. So this is the folder on my machine. It contains some Word documents, some Runthru Instruction files, a Markdown file, which I'll come to a little bit later, and is the source of my content. This, in this today's case, is shared in OneDrive, but it's just anywhere in a file system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new project. I'm just going to call the project demo, and that's the source folder here. And I'll just leave the rest of the settings just for default, just for the moment, because we're going to go in and look at some of the more detail in a moment. So what you see here on the far left is my project library. These are the files that are inside of that folder. My Runthru Instruction files, my Word documents, and the Markdown files. And what it's done is automatically created an output structure. And I'll show you what this looks like in just a moment. So these files pour into the output structure and generate HTML. So let's just do a build. We have inside of Runthru Fusion an inbuilt browser. I can preview in an external browser if I wish to, but we'll just look at the internal inbuilt browser for the moment. And we see here each of these 5 pages is now a page in this demonstration site. So for instance, if I look at the Runthru Fusion section, it's that Word document here now as HTML, and Runthru Fusion has inbuilt an ability to take Word documents and convert them into HTML. If I go and have a look at the Salesforce example, it is that Runthru Instruction file I showed you right at the beginning in front of Runthru Instruction, but it's the HTML of it. Automatically from the Runthru file, we convert it to HTML and pour it into the site using the template that I have selected when I created the site. We'll come back to templates in just a moment. Now, the most common thing that we do with sites is we start to organize them. We give them some sort of ontology is the formal phrase for it. We organize our content. So where we do that is in this output structure here. So I'm going to create a new level. Level's like a section, I suppose. And we can see that we've got, Salesforce, SharePoint, and Fusion. So let's just create a section called, or a level called Fusion. Let's grab this Runthru Fusion page, and I'm going to put it into this section. So I'm just going to use some keyboard shortcuts here to put it into that section. I'm just using the Alt and the arrow keys on the keyboard. Then I'm going to create another section, which I'll call Salesforce. And I just grab that and pop that into that section as well. And Salesforce introduction is obviously about Salesforce, so that should go in there too. We'll add another level, which we'll call SharePoint. This will be one, oops, SharePoint. Remembering that it's a capital P, and we'll put that into that section as well. So what does this look like now when we do a build? When I do a build, you'll see that now each of these, the major areas, Fusion, Salesforce, and SharePoint, have a different icon because these are now sections. Let's just preview this inside a browser and click on, say, the Fusion, and click on the Fusion page, which is a page inside that section or level. And you can see that the breadcrumbs are automatically created for us. Runthru Fusion does that for us. And we have a better organized site now by organizing these the content into better sections. What I'm going to do is add another file into my demo folder here. So I'm just going to grab that from a different folder on my machine, copy it into here. So I've added a new run-through instruction file. It's going to refresh my view, and we'll see here we now have this new file appear in my project library because it's a file and disk. What I want to do is convert that into a page on the site. Because this is about ServiceNow, I don't have a ServiceNow level or section, so let's just create one, ServiceNow, and let's just add that file into there. So I've clicked on the little link, which is adding that page into this ServiceNow section. Yeah, let's just see what that looks like when I do a build. Open it up in the browser. So we now have ServiceNow as a new section. I can click on that. Well, the title's not looking too great. We better go fix that. But if I look at the page, it's brought in all of the images and the output, the run-through instruction HTML output is brought directly into the page automatically. So you can see here, we can very quickly and easily take source run-through instruction files and bring them into a site. Let's just rename this so it looks a little bit more. So it's connecting. We don't need run-through instruction. So I'm just going to change that, connecting to ServiceNow with something wonderful called OAuth. Okay, yep, that's a better title. We can leave the rest of the stuff the same. Let's just look at this now. So if I look at it inside the inbuilt browser, which is the same as the external browser, click on ServiceNow. That title's looking much better. So without having to really be an expert in HTML and design and all those things, we can manage our content, manage our hierarchy, our ontology, and pour it into our website and generate great looking output very quickly and very easily. The old way would be tough. You would have make folders, you copy and paste bits of HTML in. It gets very boring very quickly. Or tedious is probably a better word. Now, one of the things on these pages that you might have seen or might not have seen is we've got this thing called footer content, which is pretty bland and boring. We want to do something more with that. It's quite common that you have common things, the common bits of content that you share across different pages. And rather than playing and working with templates, we've added a very simple system inside of Runthru Fusion, which allows us to work with variables. So here I have some variables. So you'll see here this footer content is a variable, and the value there says footer content, which is not what I want. I want something a little bit more interesting. And it's quite common for people at the bottom of their website to have something like a copyright. And you can imagine at the end, as the year rolls over, you want to change this to 2024. Hopefully we get to 2024. But when we do get to 2024, you're going to have to change that across all your pages if you're doing this with single pages. Or it gets very tough. But with Runthru Fusion, what we can do is we can just add that variable, do a build, and what you'll see at the bottom of the page is that variable, if I scroll to the bottom of the page here, is now that little piece of HTML. We can go a little bit further with these variables as well. It's quite common to have things name things, and naming things is the most difficult thing. Naming pets, naming your children, naming products, naming features in products. It's a very tough thing to do. So what we've also added is the ability where you can define your own variables. So in the same place here, I can add a new variable, which I'll call product name. And I'll give it Runthru Fusion because we're talking about Runthru Fusion today. That is our product name. So I've added a new variable called product name, and its value is Runthru Fusion. Save and close. And I'd like to use that somewhere. Guess what? We can use it in our Runthru instruction files, but also in our Word documents too. So I'm just going to open up this policy document, which is a Word document. Edit this in Word. So this is relevant to product name. So this is how I use that variable in my text. And authorized by, well, that's now the 24th of May. I'll authorize this. Better change that, otherwise our change management people get upset. And May, right, and close it and save it. So I've edited that Word document. I've added the variable. And now if I do a build, and look at that page. What page was it? It was the policy document. There we go, this policy document. You can see that it's substituted Runthru Fusion for where that variable was. It's also regenerated the HTML, but Runthru Fusion's a little bit smarter than that as well. One of the things that we do is we go and look at the heading levels inside the Word document and use them in intelligent ways. So we can use them for navigation here inside of our HTML in our output. Runthru Fusion does that for us. Okay, let's imagine we want to search across the site. Now, search is generally a complex topic. You generally have some sort of service that you pour your data into, and it gets very tough. With help sites and those sorts of things, you've got to make them stand alone. They've got to run by themselves. And sometimes in your organization, you don't want to give your data to external third parties. So how do we do that? Now, if I search for SharePoint here, nothing's working. But what I can do, let's just close this for a moment. Let's close that for a moment. Let's go back to our output structure. And I'm going to say, add and enable search components. It adds this little page here. We won't go into the detail of that on today's call. I'm going to do a new build. And now when I do a search here, if I do search for SharePoint, you'll see that search pops up. So another thing that Runthru Fusion does is instead of you having to use an external service is that we've built into the process of building HTML the ability to do some nice smart searching, both into the UI, but also into the engine that sits behind that generates the HTML behind the scenes. So far we've been working on this Contossi, which is a sort of a demo company name that we use. Another thing that's quite common is that the templates change over time. The branding changes, the colors that you use. Maybe a designer comes along and wants to change the design of the site. And when you separate your content, as we're doing here from your design, it becomes very easy inside of Runthru Fusion to meld the two. So what I'm going to do here is go project, change the template for a Fusion project to our runthru.com help site template. So what this is going to do is if you had to do this manually, you have to go open up your bits of HTML that you got out of Runthru instruction, and you'd have to open up your new template, copy and paste the HTML in, make sure the styles are okay, put it into the right place on the site, make sure all that sort of palaver. We don't need to do that. We can just go change the template, and you can see that the template's changed, but my structure remains the same and the source content remains the same, except that we now have this new template applied. So we can very quickly and easily change our branding, update our branding, update our content very quickly, and also very easily inside of Runthru Fusion. So we've focused on, so far, on Runthru instruction files, and Word documents being poured into a site. But in today's world of software, both for internal and external use, people are using another format called Markdown as their way of interacting or typing in text, or typing in content, adding knowledge. So if I just open up this, run through this SharePoint, this Salesforce introduction.md, MD stands for Markdown. MD is the file extension for Markdown. I've just double clicked on that, and now I have the source Markdown. And as you can see, it's just very, very simple text with very simple Markdown. There's the markup, I should say. There's not a lot of square brackets and H1, H2s and all those sorts of things. Markdown is built with worrying about the content so that subject matter experts can very quickly and easily add content into the site. What I'm going to do here is just remove this text, and I'm going to, rather than watching me type, I'm going to, I just used a quick keyboard shortcut to paste that text in. What is this? So this double hash here generates a headline. But what we're seeing here is a little bit more than what you get out of other Markdown editors. Now, you can edit Markdown inside of Notepad, or you can edit Markdown inside of Visual Studio Code, which is cool. You can still go do that if you wish to. But when we integrate it into Runthru Fusion, you can see here that it's pouring that Markdown into the current template that I have chosen for this project. So we can see live what a heading will look like, and live what text will look like. We'll see what our variables look like as well. We can see that our variable is being substituted here as we work with Markdown. So it's more than just plain Markdown. It is Markdown inside of Runthru Fusion that works with inside the ecosystem. Now, for those who have not seen Markdown, Markdown has a lot more than just plain headings and paragraphs of text. It's very easy to add tables. It's probably one of the more difficult things to do inside of HTML. So here I've just added another row inside of the table. Again, that's picking up the style directly from the template that we're using inside of Runthru Fusion. But we can mix and match this as well. We can pop in this info block that we use quite commonly on our Runthru support site very quickly and easily. And we've got a table inside that little info section as well. So we can mix and match things to make our output and our content much, much richer. So we're seeing a live preview of this particular page. If I save all and close this and just do a rebuild of the site. So I was editing just one page. Now I'll just rebuild the site, and I look at I forget what was the Salesforce introduction, just view this page in output. And there we see in our site that edited file appearing inside the styling of the template that we've got inbuilt into our Runthru Fusion site. Okay, so we've got our, let's go back to the Markdown document, editing the Markdown document. We have here our bit of Markdown, text, tables, all very simple and relatively easy with the added spice of the variables. But Runthru as a company, comes from this world of adding steps and procedures and markup to screenshots and making them great help content. You can do that with Runthru instruction, and I've already shown you how you can pour that into a whole page into a site. But let's say we wanted to add some of the documentation, as you've seen here, but then added that Runthru instruction file in the middle. How would you do that? One of the things that we can do very quickly and easily inside of Fusion is, instead of having to go back and copy and paste the HTML and bring it back and all that sort of palaver, is I can just take this Salesforce example, and I'm going to take, I'm going to copy the URL as a subscription. And then I'm going to come into my Markdown and paste it. Now, it's poured in a little bit of complex HTML here, but before we jump into that, we can see that that Runthru instruction file is now a part of this Markdown file. It's when we build, what we're doing is we're taking the Markdown, grabbing the HTML content from the instruction file and pouring it into the Markdown. And this little instruction here says run through subscribe from this file, which is over here, and get that particular part of that file and bring it directly into our Runthru site, into our website, into our Markdown. In some cases, with Runthru Fusion, not everyone's going to have run-through instruction. We'd love everyone in the world to have run-through instruction, but that may not be the case. And sometimes you don't need all of the features of run-through instruction. So what we've done is added a cut-down version of run-through instruction, especially its markup tools, the core essence of it, and build it directly into Runthru Fusion. And we call them Fusion, and we call them Fusion images. So let's just create a Fusion image here inside of Runthru Fusion. So make a Fusion image. I'll call this Enterprise App. And now we have our screen capture stuff facility turned on. Let me just launch an application here in the background on a different screen. This is what that application looks like. It's quite boring. What I'm going to do is going to use the snipping tool just to snip this part of the screen, and let's grab that part of the screen there, and oops, not jump to a different section in the page, and then use the snipping tool, grab that, and there we go. So I've got my two screens here that I might be wishing to communicate to someone, and this is the steps to go through to, add an invoice to the system. I can just double click on this, add my markup that Runthru has been known for, click here, and okay, yeah, I'm happy with that. And then on this one, you'll be now here. So you'll be in Auckland somewhere if you click there, which would be cool and nice if all you had to do was click on a button in a dialog box and suddenly you're in Auckland. Okay, so for people who are documenting digital systems inside Runthru Fusion, we have the ability to add markup, steps and procedures directly inside the application itself. But it goes a step further than that. This is called Runthru or Fusion image. I'm going to copy the link to this and close this, save, yep. And I'm going to come back to my Markdown file that I was working on before. And what you can see is that it's bringing in the steps and the images directly into my Markdown document. So I can compose a Markdown page, both of text, tables, variables, all those sorts of things, as well as bringing in imagery directly into our Markdown pages. But it's a little bit cleverer than that. If I now wish to edit this, I can just double click on this. It will open up the Fusion image file that I've been working on. And it's quite common that screens change and procedures change, steps change, or your steps weren't clear enough. So what we can do is just double click on this inside of Runthru Fusion, add a different step here, which is now do this. And as you know from Runthru instruction, I can reorder things. So now A is now do this and B is click here. Very wrong way around, but you get the point. Accept and close, save, and go back to my Salesforce example here. And what you'll see is that immediately in my output, I see that those steps have now changed and the order is now the same. And we can also see it's flowing on B and C. So we can extremely quickly and very easily add both textual documentation and visual documentation and integrate them into one page. And if I just save all and close this and just do a build and just do build, and let's just view this in my browser. And I think it was Salesforce introduction somewhere. The HTML would appear inside the output. Let's just go back to editing the Markdown file. I mustn't have saved the file before. That's why it's got a little upset. Save, that's a bit better. And then, we see the output. We also have some smarter ways of working with images, or more visually attractive ways of working with images, where we can take that image and we can take the share, that Fusion image that I was working on, and add a what's called a click to reveal, which is sort of putting the image, the steps, which might be a little bit more visually overloading and complex, into a little revealer section, which makes the pages less heavyweight, I suppose, which we can also do inside of Runthru Fusion. So Markdown, inbuilt editor. It's in fact the same editor as Visual Studio Code, built directly into Runthru Fusion, but bringing together the variables and also the images directly into the application itself. Very quickly, so you can very quickly produce documentation of digital systems. Okay, and one last thing is, just as an added little extra bonus step, is another thing that people quite commonly do in systems and when documenting systems is not so much screenshots with steps, is sometimes they will need to add a flow chart or some sort of visual representation that people will find much more easier and to navigate. What we've built into Runthru Fusion is the ability to do process charts and charting directly into our output. We're using, just like we're using the industry standard Markdown for our textual-based markup, we're using a system called Mermaid and using it in the Markdown way of typing a chart. So you can see here that I'm saying I want a flow chart, top down, the start, name start, with a process, and then stop. And we can say do this, and we can see that live updating inside of our preview. But the beauty of this is that we can also grab these variables and we can drop them straight into our chart as well, into our graphic as well. So we can incorporate the variables that we had earlier directly even into our charting. And these charts can be reasonably complex as well. This is not the most complex one I've seen as an example, as a flow chart where starts and decision points and yes, no's and those sort of things, but mind maps, all sorts of things. We can just type those in, something that people who are subject matter experts or knowledge experts will find easy to do using an industry standard mechanism. So not reinventing the wheel. And that's built into Runthru Fusion directly. Doesn't call out to any service, it's built into the application. So that's Runthru Fusion. What it's doing, the problem that it's solving, is allowing people who are not experts in the web and not experts to take a good template, content, focus on the content, focus on what their knowledge, their subject that they're an expert in, bring that into a tool such as Fusion to organize it and generate this user-friendly content very quickly and easily. And we use it ourselves, which is another point I might add in I mentioned at the beginning, which I'll just reiterate again, is our support site uses Runthru Fusion to generate its output. So where to from here? If you go to the Runthru Fusion runthru.com site, look at Fusion. It just sort of has a summary of all the features, but right down the bottom is a registration site, so that when you do wish to have a try at this, we can get in contact with you. It is a Windows application. It works very well along with our other product, Runthru Instruction, but with Markdown, Word documents, and those sort of things to generate great looking static HTML help sites. So with that, I thank you for your attention today. Any questions, please get in contact with us, and see you next seminar. Thank you.